All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and get us started.
Sure.
I just have a few announcements to make before I turn it over for our demo, which I'm sure everybody is excited to see. Um, we do have our magazine coming out probably tomorrow. It's
Well,
a really fabulous issue, which, by the way, the featured artist is Otto Stürcke. So, is that how you say it? Stürk?
it's actually Stürcke. Yeah.
Stürk,
Stürcke.
Otto
Yeah.
Stürk. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a really lovely interview that I was able to do with him. I think you'll really enjoy the article. What a very fascinating person. Beyond the beautiful work, fascinating
Yeah.
person to learn about. It also has an article about a regional show that one of our regional, or two of our regional reps recently held in the Idaho area. So that's really nice. And other regional updates. Of course, we always have our Meet the Members feature. And this issue, we're featuring members that are members of PSWC and the Arizona Artists Group. We have an update on our scholarship, so art and information about the winners of this year's scholarship, and in a lovely art school article about practical steps you can take to help find your own voice, your own creative voice. It's a really nice article by Ursula Schneider from Arizona. And then Pastels USA opens for entries this month, June 24th. So start getting ready to get your entries in. It closes on August 1st, so don't let that deadline get past you. This year's show is going to be at the Hilbert Museum in, not the Hilbert, the Brea. Hilbert is next year. The Brea in Brea, California. So it's a beautiful venue. It's, you know, you're gonna want to do your best to try to be in that show. We have our July challenge, our summer challenge coming up, July 1 through 10. The challenge for July is Sunshine and Shadows. Remember that if you complete the challenge just by getting something posted each of the 10 days, you're eligible to be in the drawing for $100. And we've been making a habit of trying to do, besides sharing your work on Facebook, we're trying to show some work from the challenges in our magazine so that we have opportunities for members who may not necessarily be, you know, getting into shows or winning awards to also see their work published in the magazine. That's been really lovely. Our next We Talk Art is in July, on July 13th, and that's going to be Mark Ivan Cole. I'm sure that's going to be a really fascinating conversation. And Mark is also doing a workshop for us in August 24 to 25. So those are some things that you can look forward to. We recently had a fabulous panel discussion with Don Emerson and Judith Smith and Kelly Malukas. Oh, God, I'm not sure how to pronounce her. Anyway, a fabulous panel discussion about some really innovative ways to work with pastel, and in some cases not even have to frame your pastels by the time you're done with it.
Oh, wow.
So look for that link on our Facebook page. It'll soon be posted to our We Talk Art page once I'm able to post it, because we got a little glitch going on there. All right. That's it for announcements. And now for the most important part of today's meeting, we have Otto Stürcke here. He's an award-winning artist. He's calls himself a representational realist, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. IAPS, he's a member of the IAPS Master Circle. He's a PSA Master Pastelist and a PSWC Distinguished Pastelist. I mean, you're going to find out a lot more about him by reading the article that's coming out and also visiting his website, where he has amazing work posted and a little more information about all of the many, many, many awards he's been winning over the years. today he's going to talk a little bit about his process, about how our processes might change over time and the role of innovation. And he'll be doing a demonstration. So I'm going to say, take it away, Otto.
All right, thank you. Everyone, feel free to ask questions as I go. I'd love to answer questions when they pop up anytime. So, Pam, thank you for hitting on that point, which is innovation. And one of the things that I aspire to do, and I've been doing this for years, is to constantly challenge myself to experiment with different techniques, different styles. As an illustrator, I was an illustrator for a good 20 years, and working in that industry, the deadlines are pretty tight, pretty crazy. And one thing that it taught me working in that field was that you have to learn how to fix things, and you have to fix them fast if anything goes awry. And so I guess when it comes to learning pastel and just about any medium, I've been painting with pastel since 2011 when I took my first workshop from Diana Ponting, and she a Canadian artist, and it was just a wonderful experience, and I just learned to love the medium. I did dabble with pastel before, and it was in the illustration field. And so what I was trying to get to regarding that that process that I had to go through, which is much like I put it to riding a bike when you're little. You know, you get up, you're gonna have some pitfalls, and you know, you maybe you have your training wheels, and that keeps you steady. But that will only take you so far. It's when you let go of those wheels, and all of a sudden, that riding the bike becomes intuitive, and it feels good, and now it's becoming second nature, and all of a sudden now you're gunning for it, and you love to feel that wind in your face, and maybe you decide that, oh, I'm gonna conquer that mountain. And so sometimes fun takes work, and so all of a sudden you're getting all these emotions, you know, these it just feels good. And so now every time you want to get on the bike, now it's just a matter of deciding, well, what kind of ride do you want to have? Do you want it just to be nice and smooth, a little stroll in the park, so to speak, or do you want a little bit more leaping, or do you want to jump? You want to go off that ramp? What do you want to do? So I kind of approach my projects in that way. And yes, we're talking about realism because I do love representational and working in a realist style. But I go back to some of the Dutch masters, the Romanticists. There were some artists who felt that they didn't want to paint detail for detail's sake. You know, you want to say something with that detail, and what's the purpose. So I do go into a narrative when I do most of my work. And you can read about that in the article where I talk a little bit about creating the story before I create the painting. And again, that's not with all of them, because it's you know, I'm not, as you'll find out, a purist by any means. I love to combine old world techniques and contemporary techniques. So I've taken all my years as an illustrator learning mediums, learning different styles, learning to approach things in a different way, trying to think out of that box and trying to be efficient about it. And then I found out that as I read about certain artists, like Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci, there was quite a few. There's so many artists in the Renaissance era, and after that, they used their apprentices, but there was so many techniques that they were using that we use today. And one of those techniques is actually using a transfer, which I'll talk about transfers in just a little bit, and how I use transfers. Now, Diana Ponting taught me how to learn how to use transfers, and she liked to work on lacquer paper, which is beautiful paper. And the only thing is that I can't take any wet medium on it. It's made out of cork, I believe, and so it's a beautiful surface. It's made by Sennelier, but you can't put any wet medium on it. And I really wanted to experiment with acrylic, and I wanted to experiment with watercolor, and I wanted to experiment with oil. And so I've tried all these different papers, not every single paper. As I'll show you, I've tried Pastel Mat, and which a lot of artists have great success with. But I seem to fall into UArt, and I'm up and down the grades, experimenting with the 400 grit, all the way up to the 800 grit, which is their finest. And so my process has changed quite a bit over the years, and I'm happy to say that, actually, because there isn't a certain recipe for my pieces. There isn't a certain step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and I journal this for that reason. So if I can give you some advice, is journal your pieces. What are your successes? What are your mishaps? What did you learn from each of those paintings? And so I will write down my steps to a certain painting, revisit that and say, that's how I did that. Oh, maybe that's why that failed. And so it's good to revisit those things. And so especially when you're experimenting with new pastels or new mediums. And as of late, I've been working a lot with alcohol washes, and I'm going to demonstrate that here in just a bit. There was a love and hate relationship. Well, let's be frank. I hated it. I absolutely hated doing the alcohol wash. And when I first tried it, and I believe that was with when I first tried it, was with Liz Haywood Sullivan when I took her workshop. It was the first time I tried it. And then I started seeing, more videos with Liz doing that technique, and then Jean Roger Smith. And I said, they make it look so easy. I need to figure this out. And so I just kept at it. And now I absolutely love using the alcohol wash to set in the pastel. And again, I'm using some illustrative techniques as well. And that's why I combine it. So, taking all these workshops, I would say that when I took the workshops, I was very intent on learning what each instructor had to teach, opened my mind. I wanted to do as they did, just to see what I could sponge and what I could digest easily, and really focus on what it is that they're trying to teach. By doing that, it allowed me to be able to take what was really to my liking, or that felt more intuitive. And so, learning from Lisa Ober and how she worked on UArt. That's the first time I worked on UArt. And she, I don't know about now, but when she taught the workshop back in 2017, she puts this local color down about mid-value, and then she works up and down the scale. And I love doing that, which is why the paper you see behind me is actually UArt, but I toned it with gray. And so I'm trying different toned paper, typically UArt, but I'll use my airbrush, which is right behind me, with watercolor, or I just set it in with alcohol, whatever it might be. I find that using the alcohol can really create some beautiful textures, especially when I'm doing Western paintings. And I'll show you a piece that I'm working on right now, which is 20 by 30, which is a lot bigger than I normally paint. But anyhow, so my thing to you, what I want to get across really is challenge yourself to experiment, innovate, because you never know what you're going to discover about yourself. There are people who say, you must do it like this. Well, do I, and it's good to get critiques. I have friends who I often ask, what do you think? And they'll say, well, is it really necessary to put that much detail? And I say, yes, it is. And of course, I think about it, and it's true. What purpose does the detail serve, for that matter? And so, I won't judge anybody's work for the style and the detail that they put into, but I am approaching my artwork lately like a dad joke, which is art is like a dog jumping over the fence. Detail goes last. And so it's a boom boom little moment, but it's a constant reminder of, break it down like a sculptor. I'm sculpting. I'm looking at the big forms, looking at the big shapes. I'm looking at those abstract shapes, and then, just chisel away, chisel away, chisel away till you get to the level of detail that you wish to get to. And so I'm not typically working from left to right where this is done, perfect, leave it alone, and then keep going. No, I'm working the whole painting at once now. And so yeah, so I'm gonna show you just a few samples of that real quick. In fact, I can show you a few pictures if you like first. I'm going to share my screen here. Hopefully I don't have any issues. Let's see here. Desktop, what can I do? Let's see. I'm trying to remember how to do this. Okay, give me a quick second here. Nope. Let's see. Can I show my desktop? Yeah. All right. Let me see. Documents. Here we go. File. Nope. Let's go back to screen. All right. So I'm just going to share my desktop here. All right. Let me open up that window. Ooh. You guys are seeing everything, right? Is that right?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay. So, can you guys see that?
Yes, three
Because
bowls, 3 bowls.
yes, beautiful. Okay. So this is one of the techniques I use. This is actually watercolor. So here I'm using watercolor, and you kind of see the progression of the work. So I put in some watercolor. This one was specifically, I think, Hydrus. I love Hydrus. Dr. Martin's Hydrus watercolors, and I really love how they go onto the UR paper. And so know that if you're working on 600 or 800 grit, you can get some really nice work, crisp lines. As you go down into the 500, the 400 grit, it tends to spread a little bit more. But you can be as loose as you want, and or as tight as you want, as I'll show you. But this is kind of like the 3 stages of that painting. And then you have this was a poinsettia that I was working on last December, and again attempting to do the alcohol wash, and actually worked out pretty well. But I just wanted to show you a few different methods. Now I will show you some of these finished pieces. This is a new art, and I decided to kind of look at some forms and some values and whatnot, and just kind of blend it in. And then I did the detail on top of that. So obviously these are all works in progress. This one here, and I'll show you a finished picture, and a slice of life. I did, as you can see, a transfer. I did a cartoon, which is centuries old technique, and it's one of those things where the artist working from life would do this cartoon, and then they would put oil paint or pastel on the reverse side of that cartoon, and then transfer it onto their linen canvas or their birch panel, whatever it might be. And so I'll show you how I do some of those transfers. Now, the texture in the background, this is something that was pretty neat. I don't know if you guys remember when you were maybe in grade school, they taught you how to take some tracing paper, and you take a piece of chalk, and then you put it over a brick, or you put it over wood, and then you rub that chalk or pastel, whatever it might be, and you get that grain. Well, that's what I did for the background, believe it or not. I actually took a piece of newsprint, and I took the pastel, and I got the texture from the wall, literally, and then I put that face down onto my painting, and I used a squeegee to make sure that texture went onto the background. And that's what I did to create all that kind of modeling that you see there. But this was the first initial stage of that before I did that, just making sure I got some tone. But this is UArt. This is a UArt mounted panel, and you can see that I actually toned it a mid-gray before I started working on it. This was for Solace of the Foregone Seasons. This is something where I want to experiment. Well, again, I did this with the Faber-Castell, I think, did I say that right? It's a walnut brown pastel pencil, and then just using a regular I think it was a 2H or maybe a 2B for anything that was metal or metallic. I used that on the pitted vase, which I'll show you a finished image of that as well. Sometimes I go ahead and use some of the more contemporary tools, which is the airbrush. While I take watercolor and I'll just kind of put some tone in, and that helps alleviate some issues. So anybody who knows how to use a brush, an airbrush, you can do this. Now, the other thing that you can do, but I would suggest wearing a mask, is if you can actually set your pastel in as well by spraying in some alcohol. You can use this with the spray bottle, or you can use it with the airbrush, depends on what you want to do. But that's also seems to be really successful. This was for camellias, and this was actually, you can see all the different watercolor and opaque watercolor that I used just to get in some of those shapes. And this is far from finished, but I believe at this stage I did have the black background, and that was Giro 513 and 526. They're beautiful blacks. I think they're probably the blackest blacks that I've seen on the market that I've tested. And I absolutely love it. Anyway, so that's that. Let me go on to show you a few finished images. This one was called One for the Road, which was paying homage to an uncle of mine who had passed away. He loved his whiskey, and he loved going to Whiskey Pete's in Las Vegas, so that put a little shot glass for him. And I wanted to challenge myself on how to do this gradient light, and it was a challenge, but I really liked the way it turned out. And I'm trying to remember what I did this on. I can't remember. Believe it or not, I think this was actually Canson paper. This was a large 18 by 24 portrait of my son. The original was actually done on a wood panel that was primed with Art Spectrum Color Fix. It was a blue haze, I believe, is what it was. Blue haze was a primer, and I really like the primer. So if anybody, I don't know if any of you prime. I'm not doing as much priming as before, but it is a good primer, and I ended up doing this piece of my son when he was just under 2 years old. So it was really pleasant piece to work on. Camellias was an 18 by 24. Here you can see the finish detail on it, and it was interesting. It was interesting to work on 800. This is on 800. And wow, you can get some detail on it if that's what you want to go for. So you have to have a softer hand because it does eat up the tooth quite a bit. But I really enjoyed the process on this one. This was Night of the Sugar Moon. I think this was done on 500, and just here I'm experimenting with different textures, wood, the velvety cloth. So it was fun to work on that one. Here you were talking about the Drifter. So this is actually on a primed panel again with our Spectrum
My
Color.
favorite.
What's that?
I just said it's my favorite.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, this one gave me issues. I don't think I put enough tooth on it. So, but I remember having some issues with it, but it turned out well for me. So I'm like I said, it was quite a learning curve priming a panel, but I was happy with the results. But it was a struggle, I gotta admit. This is on UArt 600. Going the opposite of chiaroscuro and working in these soft neutral tones. And so this was again a pretty good challenge for me working with these much higher key palette. So you can see some of those subtle shifts, blues and grays and soft purples and such. But it was a good challenge. So let's see, where are we? Going down. Okay, this was an 18 by 24. This was on La Carte paper, and it was one of my first paintings on La Carte. And it takes quite a few layers to finally get that nice frosting on the, and you get to move it around and manipulate it in such a way. So it was really interesting. I haven't worked on La Carte in a while, but I want to revisit it. I had a good experience with that. My first painting, this was La Carte, my first painting ever entered into a contest, and this was for the Pastel Society of America. And by golly, if I wasn't surprised when I won the Diane B. Bernhard award. So it was a pleasant surprise. This was back in 2012. and I got to go to New York with my little guy who's only 9 months old, and my wife. So it was a really pleasant experience to be able to meet many of you in New York for that show. Hard to believe it's been so long ago. This was on Canton, working with grays. This was a really good experiment because all the grays were mixed. They were not applied. In other words, I used nothing but black and white to create every single value on this piece. That is a really good, a really good technique to help you with value. I know, I'm crazy for doing it, but it was enjoyable. There's a finished piece for To Love and Light. So you guys saw the beginnings of it. Anyway, I had a really really good time with this one. It was on UART 500, I believe. This is a piece on Lacarte paper, dark. It's called The Last Ride, and this piece was whoa, it was a tearjerker because it was, you see that little princess there? That was Bella, who passed away from cancer. This is a painting that was done after she passed away, and this was her last wish. So she wanted to be on the teacups when they finally, told her that she was going terminal. So it was a bittersweet portrait painting that I did, and still gets to me at this point. But anyhow, it's these types of pieces that I love to connect to. I feel like if I'm going to take this hours to do a painting, then I need to be connected to it thoroughly. So it was a beautiful piece to work on. Landscapes, you guys don't know me for landscapes much. I mean, I'm experimenting with it quite a bit more. This was early dawn on my anniversary in May, and so I did on location. I did a quick study of it and got some photographic reference, and then came home to the studio to finish it. So it was trying to capture that really early morning light. And so again, I'm still working on my landscapes, trying to strengthen that. I think that's it. I've got Solace of the Foregone Seasons. There's a finished piece for that, the one I did in two-tone, both the pencil and the walnut. And there's and A Slice of Life finished, and that was on UART 800 that I did in gray tone. So there you have it. Sorry, I'm going to get onto the demo because I know you guys are waiting for that, but I just want to hopefully convey there we go. Are we back? Let me stop sharing. All right, so we're good. All right, any questions at this point before I jump onto the demo? No? Okay. All right. Well, before I do that, let's go into some of these paintings that I've got at certain different stages. So
Actually,
this
I do have a question. Sorry.
yes, absolutely.
So, so you've tried so many different surfaces. Is it possible that you when you do your still life, you like to use the smoother surfaces mostly, and then maybe when you get to your landscapes, you like to do the more rough surfaces?
You
Does
know,
that make sense?
I've been experimenting with that, and it's a toss-up because I'm actually doing a still life right now that's on 400. I think what it is that you've got a point in that, yes, for landscapes, it seems like I want to naturally put more layers on. But for landscapes, it seems like I am playing with 500 and 600. And as much as I love 800, I feel like I'm reverting back to the 6 and the 5, So, but you know what? I'm gonna have to look at that. Maybe you're right. Maybe I am using the rougher grits for the landscapes, but it's not typical, guys. I'll show you. I've got this huge piece that I'm working on with the still life, and it's 400, and I think I'm really enjoying getting the pastel on there because it creates such a richness, and that's what I think I really like about these alcohol washes. Speaking of which, this is actually UART 400, I believe. And this is just the beginning stages, and you can see I'm actually just splatting the pastel on there. I took a toothbrush and to create the rust, and then you see those little white lines? That's actually what's called the second transfer. So that is if I want to go into a detailed stage where I either redraw it by hand or I can actually take my cartoon and retransfer it onto the surface so that I can kind of map out my detail. So you know, I was smashing the brush in there and I was moving things around in the early stages, letting drips happen. So again, having a lot more fun. I've got this is actually done in a workshop with Aurelio, well, I think Aurelio Lopez, I think it is. This is on
Oh,
Pastel, and this is done by hand. So this is actually done. Are you guys familiar with proportional? They call it I think it's called a proportional divider, or are you guys familiar with that tool? Yeah, it's centuries old. I gotta find it. It's so I'm looking at my reference and I'm literally measuring and I'm doing 1-to-1. So everything was done based off using that tool. So it's all done just using that tool. And this is a good exercise to just to keep up my drawing skills so that you're not reliant on transfers, you're not reliant on too many contemporary tools. The big
Is
piece
Is that,
yeah.
is that the same kind of a tool that a sculptor uses? I recently was in a
Yes,
sculptor's.
thank you. That
Yeah,
is
okay.
very similar to it, except I'm using a smaller one. And let me see if I can find it. I don't know where you put that guy, but I'm sure it'll pop up. But basically, it looks like this. Okay, it's a tool that opens and closes. Okay, so that you're measuring. If it's halfway, then obviously, if you measure your model or your subject, and then it should be the same size here. But when you move it, when you disconnect the two parts, and then you move it, well, then you're now creating a different proportion. So let's say I want to draw bigger. My model is over there. Maybe her head is that big. I'm gonna draw it this big on my paper or my piece, whatever it might be. So proportion divided, and that's how I did that piece. So it's a little time consuming. Let's see. I've got let me show you. Oh, I've got a couple pieces back here. Now, again, this is UArt, and I just started this one, but this is actually just barely starting with the watercolor underneath and a little bit of pastel, but this is again done with the a transfer and using the watercolor to start on that.
is
This
that a UArt board? Do you ever use the UArt boards?
Oh, I love UArt boards. If you get them from the actual manufacturer, UArt, I like those. I gotta say, I have purchased a few from UArt, excuse me, not from UArt, from Dakota Pastel. Some of them mounted, but I've been noticing striations. So whatever technique they're using to mount the paper is creating some kind of striation that's kind of hard to hide. So, but no, these I actually mounted myself on ampersand hardboard. And yeah, so it's archival. And so yeah, really easy. It's inexpensive, super thin, doesn't warp on you. It's great. Yeah.
Okay.
So the other one,
Otto,
yes,
we have a question. Susie is asking, when you're talking about a cartoon, are you meaning an outline?
yes.
Or-
Let me show you how to do that. Let me show you. So here we go. When you're using photographic reference, or even if you're working from life, this here is a piece of Durling. This is something that I've been using for my illustration years for a very long time. If you're not familiar with it, it's not that cheap, but it's super, 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 I would say versatile. And so when we do what's called key sketches in illustration, we tend to use like Turpenoid or thinner, and we use pastel, and we mash it down and we create these really gritty sketches. Well, if you actually take the sterling and roll it for 5 years and pull it out, it's going to lay flat. It's just really versatile. And so, for instance, there is the photographic reference for the piece that you saw, and then you can actually use your light table to do I use a 9H pencil on this, and then you can actually make a print of this that you take, and then I'll show you. Here's a large one. This is for the piece I'm going to do back there. You take this And then on the reverse side, again, this is a centuries old technique. You take pastel or oil paint and you create a rub. And you rub that in really good, like, where is that guy? Where did I put you? There you are. Like this. Like that. You see that? So I take the pastel, typically I use like a Rembrandt burnt umber, and I put that on the back, or I use Rembrandt burnt umber oil paint, and let it dry though. If you're going to use oil, let it dry overnight, and then you can use it as a transfer. And so there's the drawing, the cartoon. That's the cartoon. And typically when I do, if I'm going to use this technique, I'll just use the main shapes, and then I'll block in the pastel, and then I'll blend it all in, and then, excuse me, and then I'll take this transfer again. My second transfer, maybe I'll use white or yellow or gray, and then I can put in all the detail. Let me show you. All right, hopefully I'm not boring you guys too much with that, all this talk. But here's that big boy that I was talking to you about, okay? So that's all settled in, and now you can see my second transfer that I put in there, the cartoon, in order to start putting in my detail. And if you guys, I actually did a little video on Facebook and Instagram. It's just a time lapse, and it's like two hours of me, setting in the pastel. So this is a 20 by 30 that you can, if you can see it. The reason I'm doing this technique is because you can see it from far. If you can see it from, you can see it working. You can see your value. You can see the structure, the form. It's going to work quite well. So I don't use that method all the time. Sometimes I just go straight into it, using my sharpened pastels, my pastel pencils. So there's a lot of different techniques. This one is done with watercolor, and you can see how I'm starting to freehand all the pastel. This is a matte that I'm just punching it in there. And so yeah, so there's a lot of little different techniques I like to use. And this is a UART mounted again on that hardboard. So there you go. Woohoo! All right. So any questions?
Yes, what do you use to mount your UART to your ampersand hardboard?
There's a few archival glues. I tend to like to use adhesives. There's gosh, I'm trying to remember the name of it because I ran out of it. It's a 3M, and I'm trying to remember. There's another artist who actually has a great video on YouTube and how she mounts them. And it'll come to me. But I used to use, as an illustrator, I used to use Super 77, but then that's not really heat. Sometimes it can be heat sensitive. And then I started using Loctite 300. I never had any issues. It doesn't say it's archival, nothing. It's pretty industrial, and it shoots off like a web. So it's kind of odd. You got to make sure you have newsprint stuff underneath, because it kind of gets everywhere. It can be a little messy. But Loctite 300, I've never had any issues with that, with it yellowing or corrupting the paper, nothing. So, but again, it's if you want archival, I would say probably go with the 3M archival adhesive. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And
And then
Otto,
you can also
can you-
do transfers with tracing paper. So you can also do, just using transfer paper. Tracing paper, you can create transfers as well.
What was the name of the other paper you showed us that's very
It's
durable?
called Duraline, Duralene, Duraline. And you can get it in 9 by 12 sheets, you can get it in 11 by 14, you can get it in huge sheets. So, and then if you use the Duraline, then what you do is you can actually go to, like, let's say a FedEx copy, and they'll run it through the blueprint machine. If you want a large scale, they'll run it through a blueprint machine, and they'll give you a line print out of it. So, and it looks like, let me show you. It looks like this. Looks like that. Just like that. And
That's
then
the surface you're actually going to paint on.
this? No, this
No.
is actually, this is what your transfer. So
Ah.
you can put the oil, you can put the oil in the back or the pastel, and then you use that and you put that onto your
Ah,
surface. And
I
then you
see.
transfer. And then you-
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
All right. Okay. All right. All set to go. All right. Any questions, comments? By the way, I know I've had many artists say, why do you do that? And because many a time, I'm going to bring this closer so you guys can get a better look. Many a time it is a subtractive method, right? In other words, you draw and then all of a sudden it disappears. And then it reappears. And so again, you gotta try techniques that feel good to you, that make you feel like you're being constructive. So this to me is almost dummy proof. so it's kind of, for me, it works, but it doesn't work for everybody. So I totally get it. They just people could be, I'll get those questions. Why are you doing that if you're gonna just kind of break it all down again? I said, yeah, my technique is about losing and finding and pushing and pulling. So as you'll see in just a bit here, hopefully I can get close enough. You guys can see this. Okay, so this is UART 600, I believe, and what I've got here is very light transfer, right? Very light transfer of this pomegranate. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Procreate, it's a $10 program that is very useful on your iPad. Okay, in my workshops, I kind of give a quick, 15-minute tutorial, and basically what I'm doing is I'm using this up here, the palette. Okay, so I'm looking at the palette. Of course, here on the screen, I'm seeing that the colors are quite punchy. But it's really neat because what you do is you can actually put your finger down and it's a color picker. Okay, you can see as I slide around. Okay, and a couple things that it does. It'll pick the color, right? It'll show me the color and it'll tell me the hue. It'll tell me the saturation and it'll tell me the value. Okay, so why am I telling you this? Because that's an orange. I set up my palettes like this screen. So I kind of know whereabouts to choose the color. Okay. So all my saturated color to the left, my neutrals, my saturated to the right, my neutrals to the left, and the value up and down, right? The lightest value up to the top and the darkest down at the bottom. And so I do that with all my boxes. Now, Lisa Ogre, she sets up her palette very similarly. And so you can see like my blue palette, same thing. So yeah, so that's how I set that up. Now, this is the same thing. Same, but look at the difference. It's the same paper, but this, I just toned it with gray. So, because I want to work up it. I really hope you are considers doing a mid-gray for us. Because I like to work up and down the value scale. All right. Any questions on Procreate? Anybody use it? Is anybody using it?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yeah, love it. And I just love your tip you just gave me. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really useful. Like, for instance, if you're having trouble trying to figure, now it's not perfect science, okay?
No.
It's not perfect science. But one thing I will do too is that I will do if I go to my layers, I will do a black and white copy to kind of see my values, that helps out. Again, not a perfect science, but it's telling me what's my dominant value. And I always try to pick a dominant value. Is it dark? Is it medium value or is it light value? And making sure that it is a dominant value. Okay.
Very cool.
Yeah. It's $10. It's not a subscription. So it's $10 and that's it. And it can get pretty involved, but there's a lot of free classes on YouTube videos that you can look at. So, and there's books on how to use Procreate as well. But typically that's what I'm using it for. you know. And it's not like Photoshop where you can really manipulate color. It does have some of that, but for the most part, I just use it for just as reference. I can use it for, you know, a digital reference. And then that's another thing you have to judge too, is you have your digital reference and you have your physical reference and how much they change, because you'll see that my print is actually, well, you can't see that, is quite neutralized in comparison to the reference on the iPad. So you've got to make your call. You know, you've got to take license to say, you know what, I'm gonna play with this chroma and I'm gonna play with these neutrals here and there. So, you know, that's where you don't want to become a slave to the photograph. Okay. So now, what I'm gonna do is, what I like to do is I'm gonna go into the actual setting in. So I'm gonna just block it in, and the main thing that I'm looking for is I like to punch in just a little bit, you know, some notes. And I tend to work with the broadside at this stage. I try to punch in a dark, and I'll punch in a light. Now, you don't have to be perfect about this. I don't mind colors actually blending into one another. Now, you can be really careful with the stage if you want to. Again, that's your personal preference. But at this point, I really like just to kind of get in and block in. And just. Again, I'm not going for solid. You can, if you want to. This is one of those things, like, for instance, something Lisa Over would do, which, you know, she'd block it in and blend it in. You know, you can use your fingers, whatever you want. I mean, it's your call. I don't blend a lot with my fingers, but that's not to say that's a no-no. I mean, it's whatever feels tactile to you. All right, so okay. I'm looking for value. I'm looking for temperature. The three main things is value, temperature, and color. Obviously, for me, the main thing is trying to hit that value. And as I liquefy the pastel, things are going to get lighter. Now, perfect example here, and I put this up here so you guys can see. I'm going to move this closer. I'll move it for you guys. Is one thing I want you guys to see is that when you have a certain color, when I work on a piece, I tend to like to have a piece or paper that's toned in the same way. Now, I didn't do that for this project, but I put some different ones just to show you what happens with simultaneous contrast. And if you guys are familiar with simultaneous contrast, I know Richard McKinley talks about this quite a bit, is the relationship between two colors when they're next to each other, and what how they're going to affect one color in that when you put one color next to the other, not only will it change its appearance in, you know, value wise, but it's also going to change its temperature. So for instance, if you are working here and you want to put a green down, you say, oh, okay, that's a good value, good temperature, but then I'll put it down here, or I'll put it here. And so depending on the tone that you put underneath, you're going to see how the mood changes. I'm going to put just a few colors there. Let's put this lighter orange. Let's go with blue as well. Again, I didn't put it on here, but it was this one. No, that's a different. So I want to show you how the color shifts, right? It seems like it does, right? Depending on what your surfaces. So if you're putting color down on anything that's really warm, obviously everything's going to start looking cooler. And if you put anything, if you put it on some cool surfaces, they tend to look warmer. Okay. Or if you have something like here where the tone is darker, it's going to look lighter in appearance. And if it's if you put on something else that's lighter, it's going to look a little bit darker. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
I'm sure
Yeah.
you guys. Yeah, I'm preaching to the choir here. All right. So, but I do like to have something on the side just to test color. Now, the way I tend to work is I tend to work quite chromatically, and I try to retain some of that chroma as I work, versus trying to bring the chroma up. I know some artists work in reverse, where they tend to work with neutral tones, and then they start kicking up the chroma. I try to punch it in first, and then just start softening it, neutralizing it. One thing to watch out for is when you're working with chromatic colors is that, especially reds, they tend to fool you into thinking that they're actually brighter or lighter in value than they really are. They can actually be quite a bit darker than you might expect. It's just fooling the eye. Now, in this stage, I tend to back away quite a bit, and I'm probably working a little bit faster than I normally do. I tend to kind of take my time at this stage, making sure that I'm getting the value right, temperature right. But as far as the lines go, I mean, I'm gonna go over them, and they don't have to be. I have to be exact, exactly, making sure I don't go over the line. No, I'm not worried about that right now. Make it look more teal. Let's go. But I do like working on this tone surface on this gray. It's lends itself really nicely. Now, by the way, if you do this and you set it in with the alcohol, you can do it several times. You don't have to get it exactly the first time. You can do quite a few passes. It's pretty neat. The UART it's versatile that way. And also, just to let you know, I did a couple studies for this piece, and let's see, where's it at? Right here? Yeah. I did a couple, see, this is actually a UART mounted, and what I did is, just to show you that I took it outside on the grass and I washed it off. I just took the hose to it, and it washes off really well. So, I mean, not exactly, because I did have some watercolor and some acrylic underneath, but if you're just not happy with it, you can actually you could take it outside and brush it up. I know Jacob Aguiar is actually reusing some of his boards and doing quite well with whole new paintings on top. So I can actually still use this for a new painting. All right. Go to my green box. And I move around quite a bit. My studio is not big, it's just a bedroom. But I tend to move back and forth quite a bit. The other thing I like to use is this chamois cloth. I don't know if you guys are, it cleans the pastel really well. So I tend to use it just to clean the pastel and, wash it. I wash it outside and it lasts a long time. All right. just trying to put some green up against that red to neutralize it. Now I see in this picture, it's actually a little more umber, these walnuts, and that's a little more burnt sienna. Get my grounds. Let's go with. That's a little bit, nope, something warmer. Just a little bit warmer. That's one thing I lack. I like some really nice rich browns, warm browns. They all seem to be a little bit more on the purpley side. So, time to revisit the art store. Sometimes, if I have the time, sometimes I just get so irritated not having a color that I actually make it. So you can actually just mix a few colors and mash them up. Yeah, yeah, it's just not the right. All right, I'm gonna go with ochre. Let's go with an ochre. There we go. There we go. A little warm. Okay. Actually, I have all my pastels on top of my Giro box. They tend to have some pretty nice browns. Nope. Ah. I'll use them for another painting. Sorry, I talked to myself a lot. Any questions, you guys, at this point? I gotta remind myself to squint. Also know that the photograph tends to flatten out certain shadows. By the way, I'm not worried about whites or nothing like that's a cherry on top. I put that, save that for later. And that's another thing too, that I'm careful not to put colors that have too much white in them, as I don't want to make the painting pasty. I tend to avoid it. I tease that I kind of avoid it like the plague. It's a little more mint. Can you guys? Oh, you guys can't see what I'm choosing. By the way, right beneath me, I don't know if you guys see this. That's just a gutter rail. You can see all the pastel that goes down in there, and then I'll just kind of sweep it out into a jar, and I'll make new pastels out of that. I'll reconstitute them.
Otto, sorry, is that a UART 400 that your surface is a UART 400?
This is UART 600.
Oh, 6, okay.
Yeah, so when I use 800, I use watercolor underneath, but I won't use acrylic. That's because there's just not enough tooth for it, and the polymer in the acrylic eats up the tooth pretty quick. There is one color I want to try out, and I haven't used those colors on the UART paper yet. Have you guys? There's this one acrylic paint that's made with resin, not acrylic polymer, which is supposed to be outstanding. It's made in the UK, and I'll have to get that name for you. I'm drawing a blank. They come in pretty much in liquid form, or excuse me, they're viscous, but well, actually they sell them in low viscosity and high viscosity, and I'll have to get the name for that. But they're supposed to be resin-based acrylics, which is supposed to be a lot more remarkable. In that they don't eat up your tooth as much. And there's only one company that sells it, and it's in the UK. A lot of illustrators use it quite a bit. Any questions, you guys? You guys okay?
Yeah, I just think to myself when if I'm ready to, like when I look at your photograph, I think, look at all that texture. Look at the texture on the pomegranate. Look at the texture on the walnuts. And I think what will help me the most is if I use the most textured surface. So I'm going to use a 600 or an 800 as opposed to I always use 400. And then when I go to use a 600 or 800 and I drop some pastel on there, I'm like, whoa, it just takes up so much. So
It does, and you know what? You'd be surprised how much texture you can actually get it on 800.
yeah,
You know, it's just that you have to have a lighter hand. So
right.
it's not that you necessarily need a more textural paper. It's just the effect that you give it, right? You're saying that this is grainy, and you're saying that this is mottled, or you're saying that this is spotted, and so it's more the technique than it is the paper.
Yeah,
But the paper is I use the grit of the paper as you know, I the first decision I make is how much pastel do I want to put on here, you know, and or how heavy do I want to go? How you know how heavy handed do I want to go? And so, you know, which is why on the saddle I'm using 400 because I really wanted just to dig in, and I knew that the 400 could handle that as opposed to the 600 and the 800. I will say that whenever you're doing a drawing or transfer, that the 600 and the 800 are beautiful for good detailed drawings, if that's what you want to go for. And also when you're applying a watercolor, let's say a gouache, which is a French word for like a light underpainting, those you get some really nice, beautiful, clean lines, and it tends to bleed on the grittier papers.
Mm.
So let me at least go into the pomegranate. We have about maybe 15, 20 minutes. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, yes.
No, yes, no. Let me
Yes,
know.
yes.
I can keep going if you guys want me to keep going. I'm good. You know, if you guys want me to keep going,
Yes.
I'll go as long as you want.
Well, you know, the nice thing is if people have time crunches and need to drop out, we are recording this, so you know, people can revisit, come back in and see what they missed if that happens.
So what I can do is I can focus in on this on the pomegranate or any piece you want, and I'll show you how I meld it in, and then how I start going into detail.
That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah. Okay. So at least let me give it some contrast then. Let me give it some good.
can I ask a question to the administrator? If I wanted to show this back to my class, I teach a class at the Vintage House, a senior community class. If I wanted to show this video to them, is it possible to do that if I have, you know, access to the internet on a screen there? Can I, as a member, can I come back in and show it to my class, or does my whole class have to be members?
Well, typically, these demonstrations are for the benefit of our members.
Right.
And typically you wouldn't be using it if you're getting paid to teach, then PSWC and Otto are kind of like, you know, often kind of maintaining some of the rights to that in terms of if you're earning money from it.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Sure, it makes sense. I just think my little senior painters who are so cute, they would love to you know, get a different perspective. I show them a video all the time anyway, but this one would be perfect for them because the shapes are somewhat simple for them to look at, and his technique right here is something they would probably learn a lot from. But I get it. I totally get it. So
I'm gonna leave that to Otto.
Oh, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with that. I'm the type that loves to share because I didn't have the luxury of going to school for art school, and so I've had some splendid people in my life give me all the answers to the questions that I had unconditionally. So I have no issues with it. So
There you have it.
thank you. That's very nice of you. They'll love it.
by the way, these Rocher Reds are just out of this world. I love Rocher Reds. If you want a Christmas present, I would say go for the Rocher Reds and their neutrals. They're a little gritty, but there's just nothing like it. I haven't found any reds that compare to the Rochers. They're just absolutely phenomenal. So yeah, by the way, I know some of you don't have airbrushes at home, but you can just take it with pastel like I did here and just get a nice tone on there of gray.
So that's how you tone your canvas with an airbrush?
Sometimes I do it with the airbrush right here, and I use
Oh, yeah,
a
there.
CO2 tank. I use a CO2 tank. This is my
Okay.
airbrush,
Yeah.
and I use again because these are tools that I use as an illustrator. And I figured, well, why not? Might as well.
Wow.
And then I'm using a CO2 tank that's right under here. So you can use a regular compressor, but CO2, I don't need a water trap. It's perfectly clean. Just know that if you're going to be spraying a lot, open a window, put on your mask because it does deplete the oxygen. So you want to make sure that you're not spraying like a crazy lot. But it's very small quantities. The other thing is, what was I going to say? It was something else another technique I was gonna show you. But anyway, yes, I use the airbrush. What's the other thing? You guys can use pan pastels if you want. Underneath, I have a whole set of pan pastels. But I'm still experimenting with pan pastels. I know Don Emerson does great stuff with with the pan pastels. I'm still not 100% sure that I'm comfortable with pastels, so I still need some experimentation. But here with this technique, I can look at it, maybe take an hour, 2 hours to block it in, try to get your values right, and you'll see it. I mean, again, I'm kind of going with the form and just looking at how this whole thing will structurally look. And you can go from this stage to maybe the next stage where you really start developing. Now, by the way, I hate pits. So I'm just one of those type of people who doesn't like pits in their paintings, which is one of the reasons why I tone and I get everything melted in there. So I know some people like to show the paper underneath. Typically, I'm kind of wary of showing too much of the pit. So I like to get it in there. I'm not going super heavy, but I do want some pigment on there. Especially if you're working on a 600, excuse me, on 800, you got to be real light. You got to be real careful not to eat up your tooth too much. But you know what? Still, surprisingly, 800 can take a few layers. Now, what I'm not doing, which I totally forgot, is especially under these lights, I like to put a hat on. and that's just to block out the lights, because go ahead and cup your hands over your eyes, and you're gonna see how all of a sudden you can see things, the values a little bit better. So I tend to paint with the hat on. And I'm always moving around. feels like. I see a lot of grays, which I really like because they're going to juxtapose with the chromatic pomegranate and the apple. So I'll put them where I can just to balance it out. It's a little bit more green. Let's try this.
Otto, how many trays of colors do you have?
I have okay. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. About 7. About 7. I have white, yellow, orange, red, purple, blue, green, brown. That's it.
You seem to put your colors right back into the tray. You don't put them in like a separate tray for each painting.
Not in this. I do this. You know what? Yes. Sometimes sometimes I'll set them aside. Yes, you'll see me throw it back in there because I'm trying to become more intuitive. You know what I'm saying? Where it seems dumb. Like, why is he throwing it away? Because I want to train myself to pick variations. You know. Yes, you can have a limited palette. I will do that when I start going to the next stage. You know. So yes, I know you'll see me do that quite a bit. You're not the first person to say that. I'm like, why are you doing that? Well, but you know what? I do have, like, for the saddle, because I already finished that stage. You can see my tray now for my saddle. So they're ready to go for the next stage. So I already have them apart.
By the way, if anybody wants to know, Dakota has a packet of UArt from 100 to 800 little sample pieces that you can buy. So you just buy the package and they have them labeled on the back. They have them stamped on the back, 100 to 800. So you can sort of test them out and see which ones you like.
Yeah, those are great. Yeah, really nice. All right, let's go with this pomegranate. Let's finish that guy. All right. And I'm ignoring the detail on that. Just a little bit dark right there. This is beautiful. And actually, I do have some. I have a lot of my colors in the yellow box, which is not supposed to be. So I guess I am starting to subconsciously put some of those colors aside. I have the little dark.
Otto, this is just your first layer and then you're going to liquefy it?
Yes, yes. I'm going to liquefy it, and then, for instance, like I could treat this. Let me, like, for instance, this guy right here. Oh, you'll see me. I don't know if you're seeing me wipe my pastel. I always want to keep it clean. I can literally, if I wanted to, I can just do this. Like, really get it in there. And do the grading. A lot of artists work like that. That's fine. You can do that. But I tend to really sink it in, and the next couple layers that I work on, the 2 or 3 layers that I'm going to put on top, I don't want the bottom layer moving around, which is why I set it in. Again, I tend to go a little more chromatic. Just have fun with it. You know, I always like to tell my students, if you're not, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong.
Otto, while you're
Yeah.
doing, can you talk about your composition, how you chose the placement of your pomegranate?
Yeah, you know, this wasn't a really something that was too, you know, I mean, let's say the composition is not all that great, to be honest with you. It's just I find it what's appealing. There are some that I do like to use. I know that a lot of people like to use the rule of thirds. And a lot of artists like to use the golden means. And so for me, it was just, you know, it was for a workshop and I wanted to put something together quickly. But I wanted to something that was chromatic because again, chroma tends to fool a lot of artists, you know, even the most experienced. And so I wanted something that was fairly chromatic. I did punch it up the color, but regarding composition, you know, I tend to like odd numbers, threes, right? Even though technically this is a fourth, but way back there. But so you have this 1, 2, and this group 3, right? So just a little triangle here of subjects. The other thing too that I found appealing was this dark mass, which in the old a lot of Renaissance masters would use these big, bold, dark shapes, and you'll see that in my paintings quite a bit. These big dark shapes help create more form on your main actors. And so you'll see that in my paintings quite a bit. I like to use these big dark shapes, helps create a little bit more form on the main actors. So again, it's just regarding the composition, I just wanted to create a little bit of a triangle here and have this dark shape kind of push this guy forward a little bit more. So
Thank you, Otto.
pretty simple. Yeah. You know, one thing I do in a good exercise is to play with geometric shapes. And what I mean by that is go ahead, cut out a circle, a triangle, you know, just different shapes and place them around in different ways. You know who used to do that? Edgar Allan Poe would do that a lot. And he's got a wonderful book on composition if you're interested. Edgar Allan Poe. I believe at one point he was the president of the Pastel, the president of the California Art Club at one point. So pretty interesting. Where did I put that quote? All right, I'm almost there. Sorry, guys. All right, I'm gonna punch that in. Almost there. Where's my grays? Where's my grays? Green gray. No, not dark enough. Let's go. Let's go dark. It's okay. Oh, it's a little bit more punchy. Let's see. Oh, I don't want to get too much on. All right, we're close. That's a little warm. Let's try this time. No, not exactly. So when you guys are working, are you guys deciding on your piece when you're deciding on, you know, your value, right? You say, okay, I want to get this certain pastel, this value. Are you more concerned with the color or the temperature? I'm curious.
Color.
Color?
Temperature.
Temperature. Yeah, you know, and there's a school of people who decide color is more important than temperature. I'm more on the side of temperature, maybe. So you know your value, but then some people say, no, well, if you know your temperature, then you decide what the color is. But some people say, well, no, I like to decide that, yes, the value, but then I choose the color, and once I know what the color is, well, it's a blue, but is it a cool blue or a warm blue? Then they, then they make their decision on which one to pull from their palette. So yeah, it's neither here nor there. It's just how your brain processes it.
Like when you look at your pomegranate versus the photograph,
Huh?
you put a lot of yellow in there. Is
Yes.
that squinting at it and seeing that reflection off of the other apple, maybe onto the pomegranate?
Yes. Yeah, I always like to I take a little more artistic license where I like to put background colors in my foreground subjects and vice versa.
Okay.
And I'll develop that as I go along. But sometimes when like I said, if I look at the photograph, or if I look at my picture, it's going to be a lot duller, and I don't want it to be that dull. So again,
Right.
I like to punch that color up and then neutralize if I choose to as I go. So now that I look on the screen, you can see there's quite a bit more, these yellow greens,
Right.
right? And just because this is more interesting to me,
Yeah,
just going red and this kind of coral color.
right.
So yeah, it's just again, this is where you decide, how much color do I want to put in there. Harley Brown is if anybody's familiar with Harley Brown, he's got a great book. He talks about that quite a bit. Why value is so important, because you can use just about any color that you want, and it'll make sense as long as you know your value. Which is why I continue to do some of those exercises where I mix all my grays
Mhm.
with black and white, because it is such a good exercise to be able to manipulate value.
Someone mentioned just a few seconds ago about temperature. What is it temperature exactly? When
Okay. Temperature. So temperature is the warmness or coolness of a hue, right? So you have if you're painting morning light, you might want to stick with lemon yellows and maybe some alizarin crimsons, and some cooler colors, right? The cooler palette. As the sun sets, well, then you're going to move into the cadmiums, and you're going to go into the cadmium yellows, sap greens, whatever it might be, but that helps you decide. That helps to portray the warmness or coolness of a subject. So when you talk about a cool green, well, you're talking about a green that leans towards blue versus a warm that leans towards yellow, right? So
Right.
when you're deciding on a color, for instance, let's go here. Okay, if I want to touch this, it'll tell me, right? I'm touching it, and it says that color on that plate is in the red family, in the orange family, and it's mid saturation, and it's also mid value, right? But as I move the pointer up, then I see that all of a sudden, wow, that's pretty punchy. More saturation, lighter in value. But what happens if I say I move it something cooler, right? So this is what I mean. All of a sudden, it's shifting warm to cool, right?
Right. Yeah.
So does that make sense?
Yep. Yes.
So yeah, so value first, and then you decide what is the temperature of that yellow. Like for instance, I got this yellow, so is it warm or is it cool? And I say it's actually kind of cool, surprisingly. So I'm gonna go towards my cooler, less saturated colors, and let's see if that's on. Yeah, that's not bad. Might be a little white in there. Gotta be careful with that. Again, I'm not worried about the highlights. That's, you know, I just put that for a note and that was it. But I typically don't put that in there. Okay. You know, there might just be a little bit more here. I'm gonna put this guy. I know there's a little bit of a darker shadow. I'm gonna go with that. Where's that color? Where's that color? That value is about a mid. Might be a little warm. No, that's okay. Yeah, maybe a little too dark. Let's go with, where are you? Let's go with all right, let's go with this guy. Where are you? This might be too red. Yep. Yeah, it's so tough when you don't have the color you want. So I just kind of blend it in, like that's a little mauve. I'm gonna shift that. It's a little darker gray. Where are you? All right. Again, I also know that these shadows weren't as dark as they are in the picture. So I can keep playing with them as I go. All right, I think that's probably good enough for what I need for melting. And if it's not, I can always do a second pass, but I want to get to that point for you guys. All right. Any questions? Questions? No questions? All right. We're good? Everybody okay?
Yeah.
Oh, a little battery. You guys can still see that though. All right. So let's get that alcohol in. Okay, so now I've got alcohol in these little containers. And I use one for the lights, one for my middle, and one for my darks, because I don't want to muddy up. Now, I'm using 91% isopropyl alcohol. The reason for that is, if you want to use 70, you can. That allows you more working time. But I'm using 90 because I want it to dry fast. The reason I want it to dry fast is so that it doesn't get muddy on me. I'll use different brushes, some for my light and my medium and my darks. So typically I'll just, stick to light and dark. So let's go with, let me go with this brush here. I tend to go with slightly larger brushes at first. When I stick the brush into the alcohol, I just kind of put it up against the side of the container, just so it's not overloaded. But you can overload if you want drips, that's your call. So you'll see how fast this dries, really quick. And you can use this as a drawing tool as well at the same time. Depends how sharp you want those edges. I also have a rag. Oh, my rag. Oh, there you go. And I wipe down the brush if it starts getting too dirty. So you saw how dark it was. Now you can see how not quite as dark as it appeared, but that's okay. Like I say, you can always do a second pass, but this is probably plenty. And now you can see the undertone of that purple black that I used, which I really like.
I didn't realize there was different percentage of alcohol. I thought it was always only 70.
No, there's different. You can see that. I don't know if you can see that. There's an undertone of this beautiful purple. Probably can't see it from there.
Mm.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
You see as it dries. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. And that's one thing that I've learned throughout the years is that the more I do this, the less precious my paintings become. I don't allow myself to get rigid. I don't allow myself to be, it's just not fun. And painting is not fun if everything becomes too precious. And so the thing is to have fun with your painting. Allow yourself to learn, to grow, to make mistakes. become comfortable enough that you can get back up on that bike and correct your mistakes. Become proficient in what you do. And the only way you're gonna do that is by practicing, observing. By the way, if something like that happens with yours, bang. By the way, if you want to create texture, you can. You know, if you want some of those layers to show through, you can take a chip brush and just bam, just create a lot of that texture that's in that pomegranate. You can see it dries pretty quickly. The 70 will give you much more time. 70% alcohol.
Much more what?
Working time. It'll give you more working time. Sorry. Can you guys still hear me clearly? I know I'm turning away from the microphone. I'm sorry. That if you're working with 70% alcohol,
Yeah.
it gives you more working time.
More working time, you mean?
Meaning that the alcohol is not going to dry as fast, so you can push it around a little bit more.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, should have clarified. Okay. Let's go with a different brush. Something medium. There we go. Some of these brushes get torn up pretty quickly. I don't really use expensive brushes. So now that I've got this up against this edge, I just worked it. If you had a 70%, you could blend it in a little bit more. If you have the 90% alcohol, you can still get a pretty sharp edge. But yeah, sometimes I just kind of like to see, just still kind of blend it just slightly. In the summer, when it really starts getting warmer, I'll switch back to the 70% isopropyl alcohol. Yeah, those reds are pretty remarkable. I wish I could get more done. I'm just not as fast as Tony Elaine, that's for sure. Or Mike Ishikawa. He can do like 10 paintings in 30 minutes. It's pretty incredible. But this is just, you got to paint with your temperament, and hopefully this gives you a good idea of what of my process and the things I think about as I work. The next stage would be to start defining the detail, right? And you can push the details as much as you want. Like if I really want to do a transfer on here, I have my transfer ready to go. It's already got beige on it. And I can do my detail work, or I can just go ahead and just start using my pastel, my Giroux, my pastel pencils, a combination, whatever. You can go ahead and use any technique. So this is actually gonna go a little darker. That's okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and punch that in. It's gonna get lighter as it dries, but if you really want to, and you say, "Oh boy, that's too light," too dark, then you can actually scrub it off. And you'll see Jean Roger Smith do that quite a bit. She'll just kind of sweep a wet brush across to pull some of that color out. But just like I'm painting in oil, I'll keep wiping my brush down, just so I can keep it clean. So you see, it's going down, it's going down in value quite a bit, and that's actually okay. Because it's already in my head, you know, what colors I'm gonna use and how I'm going to create the forms. I'm gonna create the form.
What was the brand of reds you were referring to earlier?
Rocher.
Rocher.
Rocher,
Yeah.
Rocher, did I say that right? Rocher?
ROCH.
R-O-C-H.
Oh.
R-O-C-H. What, it's not just Rocher, what is,
Henry Roche.
Henry Rocher, Henry, thank you.
Roche.
Yeah,
And is that's a brand of pastel, right?
oh yeah,
Okay.
one of the oldest brands,
Right.
yeah.
I don't, okay.
Okay. I can see where I got a little bit of.
That red is beautiful.
Again, I'm not worried too much about certain colors meshing into one another. You know, it's just, and sometimes I'll sweep, you know, some dark into a new, you know, into another place, you know, so it's. If the brush is a little dirty, sometimes I'll sweep it across another part if it needs it. Like there's this really light, this reflected light on the pomegranate, which I'm not gonna put in right now. But if I wanted to, I could take like maybe a scrub brush. And just pull color off of there, see that? If you wanted to. But I like to reserve my whites, I mean, I like to, my lighter hues, I like to use a pastel, like the Diane Townsend number 10. So I'm not thinking like a watercolorist where I'm trying to leave the paper light. Because my light values, my lighter colors tend to be pastel. Meaning, I'm not leaving a lot of that paper showing through. So if you're looking at a painting, you know, if you dissect my painting, you'll have the darker colors, quite thin, and then as you go lighter, you know, you have these peaks, so it becomes more opaque, and that's kind of how I paint with oil. Now that's probably a good example of not using it. I should have switched brushes. I use cleaner alcohol. But that's okay. You know, I almost prefer having things a little bit darker than having them too light. It's just a richness that I get, a finish that I like. I get into painting and I can't even talk straight. You can see how that's a bit dark. That's okay. I can, again, you can pull it up or just go ahead and make it more opaque, which is why, you know, I do like the 600. It allows you to put more layers on it. Again, I'm experimenting more with the 400. Kind of like watching grass grow, sorry. But you can see how I'm really trying to judge how I'm gonna make the stroke and kind of keep my brush clean. If you rush it too much, it could get messy. I know this angle's off. That's okay. And I just like to really, again, you could do this like Lisa over where she just does the local color and then she starts putting her colors on top. That's why she uses 400. It allows her to do that. But I kind of want to set my layer in. I kind of like that, setting the layer in and making sure that it's it's stable, that it's not gonna dirty my colors too much, you know, and that's just my way of working. Again, everybody has their method. You guys seeing the shift? Any questions, you guys? You guys are quiet.
So when you get into your second and third layers, will you use pretty much the same pastels you used for your first layer?
Yeah, yeah,
and-
close, we're quite close, right? Yeah, if you want to limit yourself to a few pastels, like a limited palette, you can. I don't tend to limit myself. I like to use whatever I have. Whatever I can use, I'll use it. So, you know, sometimes you'll see me with like 100 different colors. I mean, some artists are really good at limiting themselves to like 15, 20. I'll use whatever, you know, whatever it takes to get what I like. And again, you know, maybe I'm just not that good in that aspect, but you know, trying to limit myself to a limited palette. But no, I tend to use a lot of color, a lot of shades. I took this workshop from Natalie Featherstone, an oil painter, and she again limits herself to about 9 to 11 values. And so, you know, I got to do more experimentation with that. She works in oil, but I can see how that might apply to pastel, where you know she's got a string of colors and you know you know she's got neutral colors. So I'll give it a shot. You know, again, I haven't experimented with limited palettes too much.
Do you feel strongly about what brushes you like to use, real hair brushes or acrylic brushes? Or
I tend to use okay brushes, not real cheap brushes. I like to use I use these for my mural work, and these work really well. Royal Langnickel, they're about $4 or $5 a pop. So after I use them for murals and I just can't get a real good sharp edge anymore, I tend to transfer them over to my alcohol washes. So Royal Langnickel, Simmons is a good brush, but regarding the hair, no. I know that Jean says that she uses some pretty good watercolor brushes, and that's I guess you know she just has them on hand and she likes using those. But no, I don't think any of my brushes cost more than $10
Okay.
for this. Yeah, because they get so beat up. Okay, how we doing? We're already overtime, huh?
Well, I don't think anybody's really complaining. We'll need to wrap up pretty soon.
Okay, all right. So I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what I do for my next step, and I'll just finish it off here. And you guys get the idea, right? And as far as you know, the way I approach the alcohol wash. Okay. So actually, there's one last thing. I'll just do the bottom right here.
Otto, when you so you've done the transfer the first time to
Yes.
get all your shapes in, and then when you go back and put your sheet of paper over it again to do your second transfer,
Huh?
you're adding another layer of pastel on the back of the sheet so that of
Correct.
course it will transfer again. But
Exactly.
how do you make sure, like especially on your most detailed work, how do you make sure that you're getting it all lined up again?
Okay, so I cut it to size.
Uh-huh.
And typically, if you want to, I always make like some sort of registration mark.
Okay.
So, but in this stage, it was really not that important, to be honest with you. I'll show you on my let me show you with the cowboy boot that I did.
Yeah,
was-
that's the one I was
it was
thinking of.
was totally off. It was off. It's okay. That's what I love about this, because I feel like I'm kind of just, I'm sculpting and then I'm refining. And so perfect example is this. Let me see if I can show you. Okay. Look at this part there at the belt. Do you see that?
Oh, yes.
Look how off I am.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Look how off I am on some of this stuff. So, or maybe even there a little bit, right?
Yeah.
But that's the joy of this first layer. It's just, just having fun playing with the values, and then you can redraw into it freehand, or you can use a transfer, and then you know where it's supposed to be. So again, it's forgiving. It is forgiving. It's a forgiving method. And that's what I love about doing this kind of stuff, that in this paper, that it is forgiving. That if I want to, I can start just manipulating this, and just like oil painting, I'm reshaping, I'm structuring, right? You're not necessarily, you're kind of drawing and painting at the same time. And I think that's why pastel lends itself to this technique so much.
Yeah.
Is that it's constant, here, let me take this off. I'm not done with the alcohol, but you can see how, oh, my phone died. Sorry, you guys.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it went away. Sorry.
We're down to one screen now,
We're on
but
one screen. But
that
you
is
see,
amazing.
Yeah.
and it's almost like a finished painting in itself,
Yeah.
if you want to leave it that impressionistic. You decide, what I like about this is that you decide as you build it up, how detailed you want it to be.
Okay.
Versus feeling like you have to be trapped to a transfer. Right?
Right.
I'm breaking it down. Even with the second transfer, which is this guy right here, and I put it on there, and I tape it on there, I decide how detailed I want to get. But once I transfer this, it'll put me back. In fact, let me do just a little bit. It's not going to be perfect, but I tend to use a red or green. I do this lying. I do this like sitting down. But
Okay.
How are you sticking that on that board?
Okay, so what I do is I tend to use my artist tape and just tape it from here onto the back.
Okay, but what about your other pieces? It looks like they're just magically hanging on there.
Oh, where?
Oh, there's your reference photo, the other stuff that's on there.
I think you're using hinges, right? So,
These?
yeah,
These
those.
just tape.
Oh, okay, all
Got
right.
tape on the back. Now these guys, right now it's sized to my saddle painting, where it just sits in there, and I sandwich it, and so it's sitting there. But everything's taped right now. Everything's just taped. Yeah. So okay, so you guys can see now that okay. So here the transfer, you can see I just did this one line here. You
Mhm.
can see it on the back. You see it?
Yes.
Okay. Now you can see how far off I was. You can see that line?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I'll retransfer it and get all the detail that I want if I want to, or I can start using all my pastels and pastel pencils and literally start going and start structuring. I can hide this.
Yeah.
I can draw into it freehand. And just go to town with it. And that's a little warm. I'd probably go a little cooler than that. But that's the beauty of these techniques, is that you can freehand it, or you can go ahead and do your transfer. And right now I would probably use my Duros. See, so now it's just, if you want to show some of that pastel underneath, you can. But at this point, I'll probably use my Duros and just get some pastel on there. And it's kind of like putting the frosting on the cake. You put it on there and then you smooth it out. And that's kind of how I like to work.
Right.
Getting enough pigment on there, and that's how you get that nice richness. Now, it's your call if you want to start, blending this in with your fingers. My finger was a little dirty, but. Or I tend to just let the pastel I kind of weave the pastel and let the pastel kind of blend into each other. Versus, sometimes I will tamp it down a little bit, but yeah. So you decide how detailed you want this thing. Do you want to use more of a mark making effect? But yeah, nothing at this point is precious. It's not until the next layer when I really, I've got all my forms down, I've got my main, abstract shapes in. Okay, now let's go to detail. So again, dog jumping over the fence, right?
Right.
Detail goes back. So yeah, so hopefully this taught you guys some of the techniques. Hopefully it inspired you to try something new. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to contact me. You guys can find me at stürckestudio.com. And I don't do too many newsletters and stuff, but if you guys are more than welcome to ask me questions anytime.
Oh,
Thank you so much, Otto. That was just fabulous. We'll get the recording downloaded and posted as soon as possible for those that had to either miss it or leave before you were done. But I really, really appreciate the conversation before you started the demo and then the demonstration. So much information that you shared.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah. So again, experiment. So
And you're getting a lot of thank yous
yeah.
in the chat.
Thank
So
you.
if
Right, I certainly appreciate you guys sticking around, and I said I'm always open to any questions. So it was a great time letting you know. I mean, again, some of this stuff takes a little time, right? But at least it broke it down in certain steps that you guys can do at home.
absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.